a traditional art form that is deeply rooted in Korean culture's history, particularly as a form of protest or dissent in organizing movements. Wori Sori creates a healing and empowering space for women of color to come together, practice an art form with meaningful cultural roots, and raise their voices together in community actions. A special thanks to the Hana Center for joining us in the celebration. Enjoy.
Urgency.
Can't hear you, Alba.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you join us on our anniversary for DACA, today being the 10 years. National Justice for Our Neighbors is committed to promoting policies that restore human dignity, center community well-being, and prioritize equity and harm reduction in the United States immigration system. Our advocacy efforts will center the voices and imaginations of immigrants to determine a future in which everyone can thrive. 10 years ago today, on June 15, President Obama signed an executive order that would grant administrative relief to and protect immigrants who came to the United States as children from deportation, as well as provide work authorization. 10 years ago, we were fighting for a pathway to citizenship. And 10 years ago, DACA was made possible because youth came out and said, enough. Today, we continue to fight for a pathway to citizenship. As a network, we are energized and ready to fight for a breakthrough that legalizes millions. We will not settle for an executive order that puts immigrant communities through emotional roller coaster. It is time to repair our broken and outdated immigration system. On this DACA anniversary, with undocumented communities and voices at the center of this network-wide advocacy initiative, we remember that it is because of immigrant youth that DACA was made possible. Our collective voices, advocacy, and action continue to make a difference. It is with this in mind that present our call to action today and invite you to join us to advocate for a just and humane immigration system. This coordinated advocacy effort aims to create just and humane policies that will allow immigrants seeking refuge and a safe place to live the ability to do safely and with dignity, as well as a permanent pathway to citizenship for 1 million undocumented immigrants. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Alba. Hello, everyone. My name is Claudia Marchan. I'm Executive Director of Northern Illinois Justice for Our Neighbors and also a National Advocacy Consultant. I want to thank Alba once again for her call to action today and for making space today as a network on the 10-year anniversary of DACA. I also want to congratulate you, Alba, and Melissa for your leadership as the new co-directors of National JFON. National Justice for Our Neighbors has a network of 19 sites across the country whose mission is to provide free immigration legal services to immigrant communities. As a network, JFONs have served close to 6,000 DACA cases with EADs. At NIJFON, we know how important providing legal services to immigrant communities is, and we are proud also to support DACA cases locally. It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Tania Cabrera, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Undocumented Students, Chair of the Illinois Dream Fund, and also known as the fierce supporter and fighter of immigrant rights, and particularly contributing her heart and soul to undocumented students in Illinois. Tania, alongside her former and current students, has continued to focus on passing pro-immigrant legislation that provides access to higher education for undocumented students. She will now share how we got here with DACA and the work that lies ahead for immigrant justice. Thank you, Tania.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And it's been over 20 years since the Federal Dream Act was introduced. And as we come together today for the 10th anniversary of DACA, we know that students and families are still in limbo. We know that judges in Texas seek to challenge DACA and yet again placing our community with this extra anxiety and fear. We know that legislations continue to come up and block pathways to access for our communities, but we are here today, right? 36 years since amnesty was signed into law, and we still await our elected officials to grant access to all and keep families together on a pathway to citizenship. We have had some small victories over the years, right? With NIJFON in Illinois and its partnership with the Illinois Dream Fund to support access to higher education and degree completion for undocumented youth. Students have given testimony to PAC's access to state funding and an undocumented student liaison that will be at every community college and four-year partner institution in the state of Illinois, effective at the end of this month, right, July 1st. So these small victories, but we know we have so many more wins to conquer. Students you'll hear from students shortly, and I ask that you respect their testimony, provide the space for them to be in community with us all. We know that their resilience springs from the values from their parents and their loved ones who have brought them here. And we know very well that the immigrant community is alive and thriving today. NIJFON is calling upon us as a collective to lead the change to emulate across this nation of what a pathway to citizenship means for the immigrant community, what that means for to the economic growth and the mental health and well-being of the immigrant community across this nation. And as immigrants, ITIN holders, EIN, refugees and asylum seekers and TPS holders struggle to navigate their options to take care of themselves and their loved ones, it's upon us to continue to work on these issues. And I know that the work is never ending, but we all know that it is necessary. And we've seen through the work of NIJFON and its several chapters helping these families, increasing the numbers of DACA applicants, having individuals file for their ITIN and being able to work with EIN access, having the ability to share the comfort of knowing that someone is there for them to support them along the way. And as immigrants served at the front lines in this pandemic, we have lost too many too soon, but we are still willing and here and rising each day to fight this good fight. You'll hear a call to action from those who are on the ground working with clients, changing their lives. And we ask that you stand with us, demand a pathway to citizenship for all. Let's keep the dream alive. We want everybody in and nobody out. As a collective effort throughout the United States, we hope that our legislators hear our call today, knowing that DACA was never the solution. The only solution that will be granted to this community that will lift the economic barriers and restraints, lift the anxiety and the mental health that has triggered this community on so many levels, is a pathway to citizenship. And there's no way that we will accept anything less for the communities that we have been working for, our students, our families, and that we continue to support them. And I thank JFON and all of you here today as we continue to rise together to make sure that we keep this dream alive. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you for your tireless work and support of immigrant students. Your leadership has led to positive changes for immigrant students in Illinois and has paved the way across the United States. Thank you for being in this fight with immigrant students. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the next section of our program that will focus around immigrant student stories. The students that will share their story with us today feel that it is important to share their powerful stories. And this is the way that together we can create impact. Together we can create positive changes in immigration policy. We thank them today for standing up, for sharing, and for having the courage and for trusting us with their stories. Each of them will share their story in a way that they feel most comfortable with. And I invite you to open your hearts and minds as we listen. I first would like to invite Michelle Rodriguez, political science major at Delaware State University, who will share a poem with us on her journey with DACA.
Thank you. I will be presenting an original creative narration about my journey in the United States, and I named this piece Happy Meal. My journey in the United States started with my mother holding my hand with her right hand and carrying my 1-year-old brother on her left arm. Her eyes tired, fighting against tears that would trickle down her flushed cheeks. Her mouth dry from the thirst for opportunity that she could almost taste in the bleak air. Her pockets a stranger to money, but a cocoon for prayers that she would later give to me when I would need them most. My love for education intensified as I tried to perfect my English. My morning routine before school was simple. I brushed my teeth, got dressed, tied my shoes, but most importantly, I made sure to tuck any lick of accent under my pillow. I painfully did this to prevent myself from standing out an ounce more from any of my classmates. As I turned old enough to understand that my family would not return home anytime soon, my mind also began forgetting the sound of my grandmother's laugh. I was encountered with racism before I could learn my times tables. My neighbor didn't know my father's name, but she knew that his skin color wasn't created by American sun rays. So she would have us kicked out of our apartment with her complaints. Dramatically enough, the police were called to make sure we were out before the sun hid. This can probably explain why it has always been difficult for me to feel safe around police enforcement. My father carried what little furniture we had down the stairs of our apartment complex. My mother rushed behind with my newborn brother in her arms, as my second brother and I followed hand in hand. My party of 5 once again forced to seek a place to call home. This became a pattern that my family would tread throughout my childhood. It became exhausting to constantly search for a belonging warmth in a country that would burn my father's hands from forcing hours of work that only a robot is designed to complete. The exhaustion turned into despair, which turned into resentment, and soon my hands would too burn from reaching for the stars while the rest of the world was swept into a slumber. It has taken me long to learn that while I was so busy trying to climb an imaginary stairway to the stars for my family, I failed to see all the constellations that adorn me as a display for my accomplishments. Now that the White House and Congress sit at a blue table, I anxiously wait for their menu to finally serve me and the entire community that shares a similar story to mine. That was my piece named Happy Meal. Thank you all for allowing me to share my work and story today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hassan Ismail Isa, and I'll just share my story as well. Hello, I am a student at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I'm currently a rising senior, and I'm majoring in chemical engineering with a concentration in energy. With the current climate of the world, I hope to use my degree to provide a more sustainable and reusable source of energy in the future. And although I'm not a DACA student, I understand the struggles and limitations faced of being a non-US citizen in this country. I came to Chicago from Nigeria and with my family, and we moved to the United States on an F visa. And as a non-US citizen, I have noticed and experienced that there are many barriers to certain opportunities, and there are limitations to the impact and contributions I am able to make in my community, and also the participation that I'm able to uh, present in my community, and it is limited in certain aspects, and there are so many restrictions to what I am able and not able to do. And in regarding to this, I feel that moving forward in the future, we need to address some of the issues surrounding immigration, and we need to have a call to action. And one aspect of this is advocating for a pathway to citizenship for everyone. And I believe especially the younger generation of immigrants, because it is important that they are not limited in anything they do and have access to as many opportunities as possible. Also, keeping hope alive is a very important aspect of this, because hope creates motivated individuals, which is what the younger generation should be, as they are the leaders of tomorrow, and they should not be restricted in any way, shape, or form. They should be able to, use their wings, fly as high as they can, and just do as much as they can. And because hope is one of the greatest things anyone can have, and having a pathway to citizenship will allow these individuals to be motivated and strive for just being a, a vital part of their community. So that's something that is very important to me. And thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you, Najmin. We have one more student that will share.
Hi, hello everyone. I would also like to share my own experiences as a student DACA individual coming to the US from Korea. My family consists of myself, my older sibling, and my single mother. In 2014, I first learned about my status when I was a freshman in high school. When witnessing my older sibling fail to find financial support as a DACA individual. He had contacted hundreds of financial offices on his phone in order to attend any university that could support our financial limitations. My older sibling was an honor student with a 4.9 GPA and had a lot of recognition from both the mathematics and science department, but was unable to receive any form of support due to his status. Fast forward junior year, I came to face reality and harvest this mentality of defeatism due to my DACA status and my older siblings' experiences. I felt myself sitting through a one-way glass window as my close friends and classmates talked about their college applications and dream majors, while I sat across the other wall understanding that I could not afford college or take loans due to my status. I found myself questioning who I could speak with about my situation and felt the wave of depression hit me as it felt like I had nobody to relate or confide with. Eventually, I was able to attend community college by working 25 hours a week during my junior to senior year in high school and paid everything out of my own pocket. I looked into merit scholarships and found that out of nearly 90 scholarships available through the community college portal, only 1 or 2 were available as non-citizenship requirements. I ended up receiving enough credits to transfer to the University of Illinois at Chicago for engineering. And from there, once again, I felt the same emotions back at my other schools as there were no obvious resources or support at the university back in 2019. I'm here today to share my experience as my status had made my voice as an individual feel faint and insignificant through my education. As I was able to put one foot over the other to graduate with all my mental stress filled to the brim of glass, I hope these scars, not just myself, but including many others, can be the strength to support other DACA individuals and advocates alike, and stress that their voices matter and a call for action is needed to keep future generation dreams alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate all the students and their courage to share their stories today. While progress can sometimes be slow, your stories do create an impact on the immigration movement and the lives of the entire immigrant community. So once again, we thank you for your leadership and your advocacy in this process. The types of advocacy work that often come to mind usually include grassroots organizing and educating legislators. But as you've seen and heard today in these previous examples, immigration advocacy can take many different forms and be equally effective. The Justice for Our Neighbors Network has engaged in a variety of advocacy efforts. For example, last year, the network launched a Citizenship for All campaign, and this traditional effort included training the staff, volunteers, and partners of the 19 sites on how to meet with legislators and help coordinate meetings with them. But this campaign also included hosting rallies and prayer vigils all around the country. Many of the network sites used social media, collaboration, and newsletter campaigns to engage in advocacy around census issues so that immigrants could be counted, or on COVID to protect the public health of all, including immigrants. And at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, our site also hosted many documentary viewings of She's an American Child to share the story of a dreamer as told by a dreamer and her mother. We also host a Spanish language podcast called Oye Vecino to help inform and empower the immigrant community. And we invite you to listen to it on any of your favorite platforms or by logging onto our website to see some of our episodes. Another creative advocacy example is when the National JFON Network partnered with Modus Theater. And at that time, 4 members of the network read autobiographical monologues written by undocumented people for an event called Welcoming the Stranger. Or last month, when Northern Illinois JFON hosted Somewhere Over the Border. During this event, Northern Illinois JFON previewed this play that was inspired by the real life journey of the author's mother, Reina Quijada, from El Salvador to the US. Educating and advocating can also include writing a letter to the editor or sharing your story as we heard today. For example, the Austin Region JFON office recently published a book called The Truth in Our Stories. In this book, they present 12 compelling stories highlighting the immigrant experience, centering the voices of immigrants in their own words. And 8 of those individuals that are featured in the book also share their story in video format. So as you can see, advocacy can take so many creative variations. It could also be posters or murals or community art to invite people to engage in conversation. And we must remember that in all of these efforts, we need to collaborate. When we do any of these things and we collaborate with our allies and our partner organizations, it empowers others to join our efforts and amplify our voice to push for citizenship for all. We are only limited by our imaginations in developing advocacy tools. And I cannot wait to see the creative forms of advocacy that the DACA Dreamers and their allies use to continue to educate our country and advocate for immigrants. And with that, here are some calls to action that the National Justice for Our Neighbors Network invites you to join.
I'm Jenny Grabelski, Supervisory Attorney at Northern Illinois Justice for Our Neighbors. Keeping the dream alive means citizenship for all. Last year, National JFON and 19 JFONs from across the country came together with the All of Us campaign, and we demanded a pathway to citizenship. Many organizations participated in year-long local and national campaigns and fought hard for citizenship through the budget reconciliation process. And even after every no received from the parliamentarian, we continued to fight. We worked collectively and met with hundreds of legislative officials throughout the year to send a message to Congress on the need for a pathway to citizenship. National JFON was represented in Washington, D.C. in September of 2021 to demand that the promises made by the Biden administration to immigrant communities were kept. Today, on the 10-year anniversary of DACA, we are not taking no for an answer and will continue to demand that the Biden administration, without burdensome requirements and without additional enforcement, provide humane relief and justice with a pathway to citizenship for all.
Aloha, my name is Bettina Mock and I'm with the Legal Clinic in Honolulu, Hawaii. Since President Biden took office, over 2.3 million reported expulsions, apprehensions, and deportations have taken place and continue daily. ICE immigration officers have broad authority to determine whether and when to deport someone. Without legal representation, those facing deportation, including unaccompanied minors and other asylum seekers, are 10 times more likely to be deported than those with legal counsel. Yet in federal immigration court, defendants aren't entitled to a free defense attorney like in civil or criminal court. That's why on this 10th anniversary of DACA, we encourage each of you to advocate for legal defense funding that can ensure due process in our nation's immigration courts. Such legal defense funding can mean freedom from detention, fear, and the threat of deportation for millions of foreign-born residents. Please join us. Mahalo.
Keeping the dream alive means an end to Title 42. Title 42 is not and has never been a public health policy. It has always been an immigration enforcement tool. Former CDC officials and public health experts such as Doctors Without Borders have confirmed that it has always been used as an immigration enforcement tool and not a sincere public health policy. Title 42 has been used and to endanger vulnerable individuals and families seeking safety at our southern border. It is time for us to welcome our immigrant neighbors.
Keeping the dream alive means dismantling the current white supremacist immigration system with racist laws that continue to oppress people of color. Time and time again, we see hurtful laws like Title 42, MPP, and many others that use racism to keep immigrants out. What is even more evident is when there are exceptions to the rules for the benefit of white Europeans, as we saw with Ukraine. There is no doubt that what is happening to Ukraine is terrible and that refugees deserve TPS. But so do all of the other Black and brown refugees that have been fighting their own wars for decades. Racist immigration systems continue to harm families and deny relief. Attorneys witness how Black immigrants are subject to unjust treatment and are held to higher bars, or more evidence is demanded from them simply because of their skin color.
TPS was established in 1990 with support from both parties in Congress for people whose countries cannot handle their return due to civil war, armed conflict, environmental or other disasters. This protection allows for recipients to work, pay taxes, and contribute to society without fear of deportation. Of the over 400,000 TPS holders currently in the United States, there is currently no pathway to become a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, even though many have been here for over 20 years and have children who are U.S. citizens. This includes over 130,000 TPS holders who are essential workers during the COVID-19 pandemic and contribute billions to the U.S. annually. Homeland Security published a Federal Register notice announcing that beneficiaries under the TPS designations for El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Sudan will retain their TPS while the preliminary injunction in Ramos remains in effect, provided their TPS is not withdrawn because of individual ineligibility. In compliance with the injunction, Department of Homeland Security has automatically extended the validity of employment authorizations and other TPS-related documentation for these TPS beneficiaries, which will remain in effect through December 31st, 2022.
Keeping the dream alive means an end to detention. ICE holds tens of thousands of people daily in the equivalent of pretrial detention, without appointed counsel and often without access to bond hearings. ICE jails and deports people who have lived in the United States for decades, including parents of U.S. citizens and people who have arrived recently seeking safety or better life. They are held in one of more than 200 prisons, jails, and prison-like complexes, rife with systematic racism and abuse. These facilities are largely operated by private companies and are remote and isolated. Immigration detention is the unjust and inhumane practice of incarcerating immigrants while they await a determination of their immigration status or potential deportation. In 2021, the United States government detained nearly 250,000 people in over 200 jails across the country run by ICE. ICE has an appalling record of abuse. Many Americans are shocked to learn that while in ICE detention centers, people are deprived of their liberty, denied access to lawyers, separated from their families and loved ones, and subjected to severe medical neglect. These abuses are exacerbated by ICE's refusal to release people from detention during the COVID-19 pandemic, threatening the lives of those detained. Since 2003, over 200 people have died in ICE custody, including 21 deaths in 2020. That was ICE's highest death toll in 15 years. ICE contracts with both local government and private prison companies, a model that creates a perverse financial incentive to keep people incarcerated. Immigrants in detention can be undocumented or documented immigrants, including people whose immigration status is not current, is expired, or is under review. This U.S. locks up survivors of torture, people seeking asylum, visa holders, people who have been granted the permanent right to live in the U.S., people who have lived here for years and may have American citizen spouses and children, individuals with mental health and medical conditions, and other vulnerable groups, including pregnant women, families with children, and even babies.
The need for long-term protections for refugees has never been greater. The world is facing record displacement figures of more than 84 million people who have been forced from their homes. And the escalation of conflicts in Ukraine and Afghanistan triggered an immediate and steep rise in humanitarian needs. This is in addition to protracted or worsening humanitarian crises in places like Syria and Ethiopia, among other countries. Vulnerable individuals and families who are fleeing conflict and persecution deserve a safe place to call home. Now is a critical time to see that our national leaders maximize the use of the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program for Ukrainians and third country nationals fleeing Ukraine, and fulfill its promise to at-risk Afghans left behind, such as by continuing relocation efforts for Afghans overseas, creating a designated parole program for Afghan nationals, and enacting an Afghan Adjustment Act. We also urge President Biden to utilize and strengthen the U.S. resettlement program and extend similar protections to other at-risk refugees, particularly for refugees who have been languishing in the referral pipeline, such as Eritreans, Rohingya, Syrians, and others.
It is time to collectively transform our immigration system, to collectively transform our hearts and minds to be more humane, just, and inclusive. We know that it's going to take continued efforts as community to eradicate these harmful policies and create policies that respect and treat immigrant lives with dignity and compassion. So thank you. Thank you to our JFON community for being here today and for making space to celebrate the efforts of young organizers that fought hard 10 years ago to change policies to create positive changes in our life, in the immigration policy world, and in our country. Thank you for supporting this event and helping us keep the dream alive through today's event and through our call to action. A special thank you to all who contributed with their talents today, to our keynote speaker and all student speakers. Thank you for bravely sharing your story with us. Thank you to the Hannah Center for sharing your beautiful musical instruments with us and inspiring our advocacy work. We are so grateful. We are so honored. Thank you.
Esta canción se la dedicamos a todos los que luchan por la justicia y la paz en este país, en nuestros países y en el mundo entero. ¡Vámonos, fulano! A las mujeres les dice que sean buenas, que se ajusten, que se aguanten. A las mujeres les dice que sean lindas, que sean dulces, no se amarguen. A los hombres les dice que sean firmes, que sean duros, que maltraten. Yo no puedo aceptar esas cosas, yo no suelo conformarme. Y dice, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin. Todos juntos, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin a eso, ponle fin con fin. Hay personas que quieren decirte a quienes tú puedes amar. Y después te llaman pecadores por quererte bien casar. Inmigrantes viven con horror que los vengan a deportar. Y los negros de la policía que los suelen fácil matar. Vamos todos, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin. Como dice, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin.
Hey, what year is this? So I could just start the list of places not to take trips in a time ship. But if you happen to be stranded or on assignment, look to the left, you see color and racial bias. The first of the two have already been proven by science to just be the difference of sun shining. I'm just saying that the basis of races is determined by melanin, and I'm scared from evolving in different places, and that doesn't change the fact that I'm human. That doesn't change the fact that these isms are just illusions. Alternative facts can't justify what they're doing, so don't give us reasons why we shouldn't be starting movements. Let's do it, come on.
No a el machismo, no a la explotación, no a la homofobia, no te digo no, no a la intolerancia, no a la deportación, no a el racismo, no te digo no, resiste, no al machismo.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.